I've been involved in public cloud for the last 12 years across a couple of the large public cloud players, as well as now joining a couple of ISVs, both infra ISVs. And I think one thing to anchor on today, and certainly from our announcement yesterday, is the fact that we're really keying in on the file data. And while everybody talks about storage, and it's certainly an important category to look at, certainly important when Gartner does their analysis on it, we are actively separating what customers do to store data, how they scale out that storage, and how they do it securely from file data that is in massive large format that needs to be highly active and accessible by applications that are across prem, private cloud, public cloud, and cloud native services that also need access to that data to complete a function or a cycle for whatever user is accessing them. And so I think it's important just to anchor on that, for at least for my part, and to understand the way that we are working with and talking to customers and working with all three cloud providers. We could talk a little bit about this model. I know it's a little bit of architecture, and that's okay. When we think about data, and then how that data is stored and scaled, and how end users and applications access it, especially with identity and access management tools and security protocols, we are always thinking about both environments, both on-prem or modernized on-premise environments that have become private cloud, where DevOps teams can build quickly, and of course the major public cloud, the hyperscale public cloud providers. I think we all know who they are. Surrounding that, as we go to market, our channel partners, both VARs as well as VARs who have modernized into MSPs, where they're actually managing the workload, or they've created an industry-specific solution with a set of applications that they're selling into an industry like financial services, automotive, transportation, manufacturing, et cetera. And then OEMs, who, while they're still selling boxes, certainly need modern software and agile software to handle the storage need of customers on-prem. When we think about this, and Molly, you can go forward if you could, what we're really trying to do now is provide a file data platform that intersects what customers are doing up in public cloud and down on-prem and in private cloud. And we are focused at this point on the applications, how the applications are either creating data that needs to be handled and managed, or how the applications are accessing data. And with that platform, we're thinking heavily about our API and how developers and software engineers use our API in their DevSecOps pipeline, how they plug that in and connect it so that it becomes an automated part of their application development process. At the same time, we've got to check all of the boxes with a CISO in an enterprise or government organization during that DevOps process, and enable customers to define the access management and identity management protocols that they want to use. For us, I can tell you, I spent the last, many years, mostly talking to customers, and certainly the last 5 months as I get up to speed on this space and what customers are doing here. A lot of the file data that customers are using is still stuck on premise, and that's okay for now. It's okay as long as the DevOps teams have a way to access it, particularly the DevOps teams that are developing apps and services at a feverish pace in public cloud environments like Azure, Google, and AWS, when that file data needs to migrate and move, we want to make sure that customers can do it on any platform, cloud platform, or private cloud that they desire. We don't want to necessarily do that in mass. We want customers to be able to move discrete sets of file data around to different infrastructure platforms based on the workload need. You know, there was a time, as you all know, when cloud really got going, when customers were really thinking about just moving a mass of applications, and they certainly did that with web apps. Those are very easy to move. But I think now customers have segmented into the specific workload or task that they're trying to complete, and we want to take the same approach with file data. And we're hearing that from our customers who want to make a round trip with a function or some type of outcome they want to create with the applications that they're running or building. I think the other thing is the management of the data. You know, as I don't have to tell you all, this is all unstructured data. You know, in many cases, it's highly unorganized, but super critical. Whether it's a feature film or genomic sequencing or the creation of a new drug therapy or, you know, training an autonomous car, it's super important data. However, managing that data and understanding where it is, what's accessing it, and whether or not it can be moved to another platform is something that we're doing now within our mission queue, our data management UI and analytics interface that customers can use to gain full visibility of what's happening with their data. Okay, I think we can go one more. I'll get into it. So I wanted to cover 4 examples of 4 enterprise customers that are doing different things between their on-prem environment or their modernized environment, which they call their private cloud, and public clouds, AWS, Azure, and Google. And we are, again, really focused on the function that the customer wants to create within a set of applications using the data. Whether it's content creation, whether it's a customer like Cinesight that is using us to help produce file-dense, you know, animated movies that involve both digital animation as well as live actors. You know, movies such as The Avengers that need to be processed and now are processed with our new work from home environment, you know, primarily edited and produced by artists and design teams that are in remote locations or candidly working from home. They use software and platforms like Qumulo and AWS, as well as some of the software they have residing in their own data centers to create that. And you're going to hear me, you know, kind of harp on a theme of freedom and flexibility. And it's something that we truly believe in not locking customers into proprietary file systems or locking them into software that is soldered into hardware that vendor must sell their hardware in order to meet a customer's need and scale. That is not a model that we want to be a part of. We work with a customer. They're the largest processor of online mortgages in the United States. And they use Qumulo not only to flow all of the data about customers, but they're also using that to connect to AI machines that can model the faster processing and approval of a mortgage application digitally so that we can get to a point where customers can literally be approved and signed off on all the documentation of their mortgage in 5 minutes or less. That is their goal. On the IoT side, we're seeing a growth in manufacturing and the need to connect high resolution images taken on the manufacturing floor of the manufacturing process and the parts that are flowing through that system. For example, car manufacturer, quickly process those images for defects and anomalies against image recognition systems with a trained AI model that can then deliver a result back down to the factory floor and identify parts that should not go into a car because, for example, they may have a hairline fracture that can't be seen by the naked eye, so that those cars don't get produced and then come back to the dealership at a later date or have some type of mass recall.
Hey,
and
Barry.
then on the go ahead.
I'm just trying to understand that. So the customer is taking images of parts coming into the assembly line and shipping those images to Qumulo. And then in the background, there's an AI process that's running that's actually analyzing those pictures for defects, and then
that's right,
providing that information in real time to the factory floor that says this particular part is bad.
That's right. Yeah. So what they're doing is they're taking a mass set of images over a period of time. They first have to take those images that they've captured with Qumulo on-prem and push them up to a public cloud provider through our software there. They then attach those digital images to a recognition engine, and they then train a model, an artificial intelligence model, to recognize what a defect looks like. How do I say this? Defective versus non-defective, but undetectable by the naked eye. In other words, patterns that have been created in the manufacturing process that people just can't see. They then take that trained model back down and insert it into their recognition camera in the factory. And as those parts now come through, they're able to pattern match better on parts that have that anomaly or defect and kick them out and replace them with ones that they know have already been scanned and do not.
Okay, pretty impressive. Thanks.
Yeah, I could be wrong. I think it would be a hard sell to say that they're doing that real time without first training the model with a pretty broad set of data to know what to look for. But we have been able to document with them a significant reduction in the amount of defective parts. And again, we're talking, we're talking that parts that inspected by a hand or the naked eye, you just couldn't see the defect inside of it. It's just not possible. But with this high resolution camera and that model inserted into its software recognition, they're able to then do that pattern matching. It's pretty cool.
All right, thanks.
Yeah. And then I'll go quickly, but on the retail cloud, it's a similar situation where they're using Qumulo across hundreds and hundreds of stores. They are gathering information at the point of sale. They're gathering file data about customer behavior in a store or in their stores. They're then able to then take that file data up to the public cloud. They're able to do analytics and analysis on individual customer behavior based on geolocation, seasonality, time of day, and for example, adjust the types of offers and products that they make back down into each store. That does not happen in real time yet, but it is, once again, it's focusing on the data and trying to produce more visibility into customer behavior inside of different stores versus having the same store set up the same way in every city.
So Barry, I think while we're kind of moving along, I have a question for you though. You keep talking about data and you have, there's the Qumulo, definitely does storage. You're spending a lot of time talking about data. Can you talk just a little bit about kind of how you see the importance of data and storage as kind of a secondary piece?
Yeah, well, I think the storage is super, super important. I had a call with a customer last week, and this individual was not in IT. They were in the line of business. And the comment that was made was, he said, I assume that any company I'm going to do business with that's handling any type of my data can store it for me at massive scale and do it securely, or I don't want to do business. But that's not the value that I'm getting out of the data. And so on premise, a lot of our customers use us for both massive scalable storage and of course access to their file data. But when you move in the public cloud providers, if you look at AWS, have created huge data stores with S3, for example, that are really good at storing, data, particularly long-term data that a customer may not necessarily need immediate access to. And the reason I'm separating the two is the value that we provide in the public cloud is the high HPC, high availability, high throughput processing of massively large file data sets real time versus the storage.
How massively large are we talking?
Petabyte size and larger.
A single petabyte, multiple petabytes?
Multiple
petabytes? All right.
Yeah.
Our largest deployed cluster today sits, I think, just south of 20 petabytes in a single cluster. And then we have quite a few clusters or quite a few customers that have 5, 6, 10 clusters.
Growing.
And then I believe our largest customer from a file count perspective, it's in the many billions, dozens of billions of files in a single cluster. So, size can be capacity and it can be file count. It can also be how active, how many users are there. We have thousands of users on clusters, highly transactional environments. So there's a lot of different ways we think about scale.
Gotcha.
Yeah, we're actually tracking the number of data transaction calls against the platform. And in public cloud environments, as an example, we're at the hundreds of billions a month of unique data transactions that customers are doing against the files that they're running against Qumulo. So it is absolutely, Molly's correct. It's becoming more and more transactional, especially as they build new apps and services in the public cloud.
I've got a quick question about that. Sorry, Ray, my turn. With the events, one of the issues with public cloud and S3 is that the file events that come through like CloudTrail aren't always consistent. You're not guaranteed to get an event for every file that's dropped in a bucket, and you have to do some batch processing afterwards. Is this something you can do at scale and guarantee that, for example, events are fired for every file placed down?
Yeah, I don't want to speak out of turn and say it would be guaranteed, but yes, our sweet spot is doing that at scale. When compared to other object models. Yes, and customers are doing that and using us for that. So when we think about the workflows, the way that we're connecting with customers now, particularly at the line of business application owner or even candidly at like the CMO level, the marketing level, where they want to understand customer behavior, is in the workflow that they're designing, whether or not they're accessing an application. It's a legacy app that's doing a great job at what it does, doesn't need to be re-architected because of the way we run our file platform, and they want to just leave it on-prem. But they want to connect it up to the public cloud and wrap it in all the fun services that they can access and apps they can build, so it becomes a more useful or smarter app. And we are in the position of providing them the ability to not have to re-architect that app, use that file data, bring it to a public cloud like AWS through us or into S3, and then access all of those AI or ML or the IoT platform and IoT edge use cases, blockchain, et cetera. That most enterprises now are running at pretty hard as they try and modernize themselves, especially with what's happened, unfortunately, in the last several months.
So that brings up a question. Do you have any idea what percentage of, now I'll call it data, it could be transactions, that Qumulo supports in the public cloud versus in private cloud? Capacity or transactions?
Yeah,
levels?
I think from a transactional perspective, we are processing more transactions in the public cloud. It's ironic, but I think the majority of our data customers are running is still held in private.
Oh, that's
So
interesting.
I don't think customers have yet, and Molly can keep me honest here, and so can Tim. I don't think customers have yet, because it was really hard, I don't think they've yet moved the majority of their file data to the public cloud. And in some cases, they may not with this architecture. They might leave it in a private cloud, Ray, to your point, and use our API to hit services from Azure or Google or AWS or Oracle or whatever their cloud of choice is to complete some outcome. And they may even bring that result back down on-prem, like we talked about with the manufacturing process. Mm-hmm. So I think we're seeing customers get smarter about how they leverage public cloud and focus on individual use cases or workload versus just kind of, everything up there.
All right, thanks.
What I would add to what Barry just said is if you think about cloud adoption, it moved most quickly with block, VMware type databases. That's kind of a solved problem. File data and unstructured data is a lot harder. There's more data gravity. There's a lot more legacy applications that haven't been refactored for the cloud. There's a lot of things that have kept data. There's the idea of having your data close to your compute. And this is when you think about one of those first slides Barry was covering about the advent of a couple of major industry trends. Unstructured data is what's fueling the most business innovation today. Whether it's the different markets Barry's been talking about, people are using unstructured data to make business decisions, investment decisions, make new products. But it's been kind of locked down in hardware, in the data center, in proprietary formats with legacy applications that know how to write to NFS or SMB, whatever it might be. As you think about the value of the cloud, most of those applications are written to write to S3. They're cloud native. So you have to have your data in the cloud, and you have to have object-oriented applications to be able to take advantage of it. So you've had these massive file stores that are have locked their data or isolated it from the cloud. And there's technologies. Qumulo was founded back in 2012. We've worked for 8 years now to build a file system to address that problem. So part of what we're seeing is there's a lot of innovation that we could unlock by getting the 10 petabytes that you have in your data center to a cloud service or a cloud application, or to process it on GPUs in the cloud that you don't have in your data center. But it's been isolated processes where somebody had to script it, move the data, and it was complicated to get the data to the applications and the data moved. And that's the problem we're looking to solve with Qumulo, is make it easy to move the data and have it in the format the applications need it and in the location they need it. And until really just very recently, that technology hasn't existed. So you've had to build it yourself, which some companies have done, and the early adopters that Barry was referencing just built it themselves. We're trying to bring this more mainstream where you don't have to build it yourself and we can automate a lot for you.
Yeah, I'd also say, and then I'll speed up and close out. I'd also say that, the idea of customers really heavily investing in hardware on-prem is, I continues to decline. I think one of the key reasons for that is in some of these high compute workloads, whether it's CPU or GPU based, there's just no way to keep up with how quickly new chipsets are being designed for new workload types. new applications and services that customers find themselves needing. And so the investment in hardware on-premise may simply just be a refresh of something to keep an application running. But what we don't see is a heavy investment in hardware, particularly around data. We see customers leveraging the public cloud much more heavily to process and crunch and do things with all types of data, including file data. And it brings me to when customers think about what they're going to do with their file data, and I'm out talking with them, in many cases, it starts with the type of compute that they need for that specific workload. They may need a super powerful GPU instance that may have just been released to run against a specific workload for a specified period of time. They may, as you can see, they might want to train a model or gain more insight from their machine data. And of course, we have the whole suite of AI services which run the gamut of using both file and object data. We've got, we haven't even touched on the edge use case for IoT and all the telemetry data coming in from billions and billions of devices, including autonomous cars, which are constantly feeding data over the internet and then up into the public cloud to make them safer and so on. On the previous slide, we don't have to go back to, there was an arrow going up through S3, and as you all know, S3 is object, and I'd say, well, why would Qumulo want customers to move data out of its platform and into S3? And Molly's going to touch on this a little later. But again, we are not going to be in the business of locking customers into only running the data in our platform. If a customer wants to copy and move that data into S3 because they've already built a workflow there, the last thing we want them to do is have to rewrite that workflow to complete the function. We will enable them to come back with that data and without exposing the whole roadmap, do some other fun things between object and file data across Qumulo. But we've got a lot of questions. I know Molly's going to address it, so I'm not going to steal her lightning or thunder. But it's an important tenet of the way we think about the code that we develop. I will leave you with this. I think we're getting close to the end of this. More and more customers, before they move their file data to the public cloud, are using Qumulo and its API, its REST API, again, to connect up to apps that they've built or services or even functions, Lambda functions they may have written in the public cloud to complete a workflow. So we're going to—
I have a question.
Keep our eye on that. Yes.
Yes. If we can actually go back 2 slides, we'll talk a bit more about that S3 integration that you're talking about. Just to level sets, we had some internal discussion going on about what Qumulo actually is. Subscription software running in an appliance model on premises, and also offered as virtual appliances in the cloud, correct? So what is that still the case?
It's offered, it's offered as a virtual image in the cloud, running on the cloud provider's platform, of course, and in the customer's appliance of choice on-prem.
Right. So as you're talking about using Qumulo as a central point of data management, that's part of the value proposition here. But now you're pointing out to S3, and we're talking about moving data out to another platform. Does the customer have to figure out how to interface with that data again in a different way? Or is there some sort of advantage to maintaining, you mentioned the application is interfacing directly with Qumulo. Do we now have to go out and do that a different way? Or do we maintain some sort of advantage interfacing through Qumulo if that data is moved out?
When the customer moves data into S3, Adam, they do have to, once that moves into object, that application has to be written to interface with object. So technically, it would need to be, I don't want to say re-architected, but the workflow would need to be changed if it's not already done. In other words, if they're running an application against Qumulo and they suddenly move data into S3, that application would have had to have been written to run against S3 too.
I can jump in, right? So we're letting a customer run their workload against a Qumulo cluster, either on-prem or in the cloud, if that's what they want to do. But there are some tools that just work better with an S3 backend than with a file backend, right? So we're letting the customer put the data where it makes sense to let their application talk to it in the protocol with the way that it wants to speak to that data. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. And we've heard from a number of different companies about data management and how important that is nowadays, and the advantages bucketing, using a single platform for all your data and the advantages that come along with it. Are you guys going to talk a bit about what data management capabilities Qumulo provides, like insights into the data, I know you talked about specific use cases, but you will talk about that? Okay, great.
Yeah, that's the next section.
Okay.
We'll jump into how we're using object a bit more. Keep the questions coming, but that is the next section.
Okay,
yeah, thanks. So speaking of keeping the questions coming, we understand the use case. We've been presented this use case a few different times over the past couple of weeks, matter of fact. Probably stretching the past 2 or 3 weeks of tech field day events, etc. This very same use cases has been presented to us. What's the competitive story when you guys are going up against the incumbents who say, when you get to purchasing, and purchasing says, oh, our incumbent of choice is just giving us this feature that you guys are offering for free on our existing platform, or discounted some other solution so deeply that I can't get this purchase past purchasing without some argument. So what's the argument that you guys help convey to the purchasing and non-technical folks of how you differentiate between our incumbent solutions?
Well, I know Molly has some thoughts on this too. When we think about other incumbents or legacy storage providers, it's very much a hardware-based model with software written into it. They're hardware. Because we are software only, and we will evolve that over time, customers have asked us about designing, true as a service-based models, and it's something that we're looking into. It's going to offer us a lot more granularity and flexibility on different pricing models, and literally almost down to the workload, be able to price out how a customer is actually running an individual workload against our file data platform versus just charging them for capacity of storage. Which is the model that a lot of other vendors do today. So my answer to you would be, it'll be flexibility in consumption, as well as our ability to add new modules and features, and eventually run the system as a service for customers, so that they don't have to deal with any of the cloud infrastructure at all. In a non-hardware based model, we see a lot of, I will put in air quotes, SaaS-based offers out there, which are really racking and stacking equipment in a facility next to a cloud provider, and having people manage the same type of environment that's on-prem. We're not locked into that model.
So Keith, I worked for one of those competitors before I came to Qumulo, and one of the things that I was really attracted to about the Qumulo cloud model is how simple we are in the cloud and on-prem. And in the demo, I'm going to show you guys exactly how easy it is to spin up a cloud cluster. And our cloud clusters look exactly like an on-prem cluster. So we have prided ourselves in simplicity, ease of upgrades, ease of management, ease of data visibility. And that's true in the cloud, and it's true on-prem. So I'd like to show you guys that when we get past the slides and get into the demo here.
The other piece that's kind of interesting is a little bit about what's right or wrong, but we all have slightly different models. Some of the alternatives out there have put hardware in data centers that are in close proximity to the cloud vendors. Some of them are integrated into cloud vendor management tools. Some of them are available in marketplaces. There's just different thoughts and methodologies. The Qumulo approach is we are really a software only company. We offer industry standard hardware. If customers want to buy an appliance from us, we have some industry standard hardware that we offer at almost no markup just to make it easy for them to consume it. We're available in the cloud marketplaces, but our software actually runs natively on the cloud infrastructure. And what that brings to you is if you really are going to the cloud for a cloud type of model where you want to be able to spin up an instance super fast, you can do it literally, and Tim will be showing this in a second, very quickly. There's no ordering, there's no delay. If you want to spin up, spin down, if you want access to 1,000 GPUs, or if you want access to a petabyte of capacity, we are very dynamic to go with the cloud infrastructure in that sort of way. And we're integrated with the tools you buy through the marketplace. So it's a very different approach than some of the legacy companies who still are hardware bound and still need to run on their pre-qualified, pre-certified hardware, and they're getting that hardware closer and closer to the cloud, where we're actually just running up in the cloud. In some cases, it doesn't matter as long as your data is close to the cloud. In other cases, if you want that agility and nimbleness, it matters a lot.